As the summer progresses, we often see adult corn rootworm beetles start to show up in corn. This usually happens right around tasseling time because those corn rootworm beetles love corn silks.
Well, just one more part of the corn plant that these corn rootworms are going to try to attack. But really, late in the season, you will see a number of beetles that'll be up around the silks. And they're different looking because there are several different beetles that can be doing this. Now, when it comes to corn rootworms, we face mainly three different types of corn rootworms. We have the northern corn rootworm, the western corn rootworm, and also we have some southern corn rootworm. It was interesting, this summer I was down at bug camp at Mississippi State and we saw some southern corn rootworm beetles, and they said, yeah, you probably don't know what that one is. And I said, well, are you kidding? That's a southern corn rootworm beetle. And they said, oh, have you seen those before? And I said, yeah, we get them up in South Dakota in the northern part of the corn belt, I guess you could say, all the time. We see those beetles too. Now, they aren't as prevalent as the northerns and the westerns in the upper Midwest, but we do see some southerns as well. You know, as far as knowing the differences between the bugs, you can control them all the same. It isn't really a big deal, but there will be some differences as in terms of where they're going to lay their eggs and how long those eggs are going to last in the soil, that kind of thing. So it is important when you're looking at these corn rootworm beetles, control them on the early side before they lay their eggs. You don't even have to worry about that.
Yeah, but there really isn't that much difference in terms of where they lay their eggs or anything else. They all feed on corn silks in the adult stage. They all lay eggs. The eggs hatch and those larvae have to feed on corn roots, usually within a couple of days, otherwise they're going to die.
And they also like taking nice scenic family vacations out into soybean fields to potentially lay some eggs there as well.
Out there, right. So the green ones are the northerns, the yellow and black ones are the westerns, and then the southern ones are going to have some spots on there. Some people will misidentify those as bean leaf beetles, but they're not bean leaf beetles unless they have a black triangle behind the head.
Now, as I mentioned with control, fortunately these beetles are very easy to control with pyrethroid insecticides. The challenge is when we're talking late season corn applications, you're probably talking about using an airplane or maybe a very high clearance sprayer. And in those cases, you may have some additional expense if you don't own one of those two machines on your farm. You've got to hire somebody to come in. But in terms of the insecticide needed to kill those beetles, it's usually the lowest labeled rates of most of the pyrethroid insecticides.
We don't worry too much about the damage that these rootworm beetles are going to cause unless they clip those silks right down to where the silks are coming out of the husk. Then it's possible that pollination may be affected.
It's more than possible. It's absolutely happened. I've been in fields where there's virtually no kernels on any of the ears because those silks were so heavily clipped off.
Yes, but all
right
I'm saying is that 95% of the time this is not an issue.
No, it's very rarely a problem, but it can be. And it's one of those things where you have to get out and look. And when we think about economic thresholds, here's where that cost of application really comes into play because you got the insecticide and you've got the equipment to get it done. Now, if you're talking about an airplane that costs $8 an acre to fly over and you're talking about $1 or $2 of pyrethroid insecticide, well, it only takes a couple of bushels to make that work. It's really not that big a deal. So you don't have to have a whole lot of beetles to justify that. And so what many guys will do is say, well, I don't know if I have enough beetles to justify the treatment, but I also have some corn leaf aphids or I have a few other bugs. When you add that all together, a lot of times an insecticide may be warranted.
Well, let's talk just a little bit more about those treatment options real quick. Darren mentioned cheap pyrethroids. Yes, silencer is $2 an acre for the full rate, but keep in mind something like fanfare is a couple bucks an acre more. That's bifenthrin, and that's going to get spider mites. Usually if you're spraying corn late in the season, we want you to use something that's going to get spider mites like fanfare, for example, or you could switch to cobalt. That's got 2 different active ingredients, so that's a pretty nice way to go too. A lot of people are just very concerned about flaring up spider mites late in the year, and I don't blame them. For an extra couple bucks, then you don't really have to worry about that.
And of course, you could be putting in a fungicide right at that same timing if that works out for your crop. You know, once your corn is fully tasseled, then you're pretty safe to be putting the fungicides out there. So you've got corn that the silks are out right now, and we're talking about the beetles that may be feeding on those silks. It's a perfect time to put a fungicide out as well.
With these adult corn rootworm beetles, let's think first about where they came from. If you have adult corn rootworm beetles in your field, you had rootworms feeding on your corn roots earlier in the season. So that means that either your BT corn didn't work or didn't work perfectly, or your insecticide didn't work or didn't work perfectly. So you've got to take a look at, hey, next year, if I go corn back in this same field, maybe I need to do something else. The other thing you want to think about is, as soon as those adults show up, you've got to get them sprayed. Because if you wait a couple of weeks, then they're going to mate, they're going to lay eggs, and all you're getting now is a revenge kill.
And the issue of resistance to some of the traits out there is a real common one now across the country, where we're seeing the single traits are just not enough for corn rootworm. There is resistance building and also heavy pressure situations. So going to more of the smart stacks type approach, and I realize there's more traits coming out now with stacked BTs for corn rootworm. That's a good way to go. On my farm where I'm doing some continuous corn, I'm doing that and a full rate of insecticide just to keep the rootworms under control. I tried to go a little bit cheap just a couple years back in 2012. I thought, oh, if I put insecticide on, a single trait will be fine, but we do have resistance in our area to those single trait BTs, and just the insecticide alone was definitely not enough. So last year I switched. I used a smart stacks and a full rate of insecticide, and I had virtually no adult corn rootworm beetles in my field.
Well, once again, adult corn rootworm beetles can come in different colors. There are different types of adult corn rootworm beetles, but they're really all the same. They're all going to go right for your corn silks. You've got to be scouting for that and make sure you're not getting too much silk clipping so pollination gets damaged. The other thing is try to spray those beetles right away when you see them so you get them before they lay eggs. That way you can lower your rootworm pressure going into next year.
Well, it sounds a lot like weed control. We have to spray our weed of the week before it goes to seed so you don't have an even bigger problem next year. Can you identify this week's weed?